Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Gemology for Schmucks. My name is Peter Nelson. I'm here to guide you in everything you need to know about gemstones. Today we're talking about quartz, one of the two most common minerals found on this planet, and it's got about 10,000 different names. But don't worry, we're going to demystify it all right now. The first thing that you need to keep in mind when understanding quartz is to step away from the names for the beginning and try and put it in one of three categories. These three categories are how it crystallizes in the earth. Chemically, all the different types of quartz are basically the same. They're just silicates with trace elements that change the colors. Everything else is just down to structure. So the first category that we're going to talk about is crystalline. Crystalline, obviously as the name indicates, are single crystals or large crystals. Sometimes they're twinned together. But either way, they're very easy to see. If you look at the inside of a geode, there's lots of individual crystals. That is crystalline material. Amethyst, that's an example of purple crystalline quartz. Citrine, yellow crystalline quartz. They're not that different, but they do have wildly different names. They seem like totally different gemstones, not by much. When you test them, they're effectively the same. An advanced lab is going to be able to test the trace element chemistry, but that's not necessary for us. For us, if we know it's quartz, it has these properties, this refractive index, this color, the end. Everything else is just sprinkles. So we go from big, easy to see crystals down to much smaller crystals. And the Greek word for small is mikros. So microcrystalline. Microcrystalline basically are crystals that are small enough that you may need magnification to see them. That could be either a loupe or it could be a microscope. Now, there is not a very clear definition of how much magnification is allowed in order to see microcrystalline material. So some scientists will talk about jasper being a type of microcrystalline quartz. Other people will say it is the next category. But that really comes down to how much magnification is allowed. It's ill-defined. So what I'll say is knowing that the category is there is enough to help structure your thoughts about quartz. Everything else is just an argument for trivia, which does not put a single coin in your pocket. It just gives you an ego fluff, which realistically, is that a good thing? Is it necessary? I think we all have better things to do. Microcrystalline quartz, one very good example of that is aventurine. Aventurine quartz typically is green color, and it often has a phenomenon called aventurescence, named after the same gemstone. So aventurescence is basically a sparkly phenomenon that we see as the stone is rotated in light. And that's because of the borders in between those tiny, tiny crystals. Not all aventurine have that same phenomenon, but there you go. So we go from small crystals down to cryptocrystalline. Those of you Bitcoin nerds may know that crypto means hidden. So this type of crystalline structure are basically small crystals that are so small that you can't see the boundaries between them, even with magnification. Now, logically, if we think about this, if you can use an electron scanning microscope that can see very, very small things, much smaller than crystals, I imagine that you're capable of seeing the borders between individual crystals here. At which point we're doing more than just splitting hairs, and again, going back to the trivia thing, the distinction is not that important. Knowing that the category is there is really all that's important so that you can understand which quartz is which. And I would say that cryptocrystalline quartzes are the most abundant in this whole family. Now, the purpose of this video is not to go into all of the names because it will put all of you to sleep, but to make sense out of particularly this final group of quartzes, the next thing that we need to think about is how much light is allowed to pass inside of the body of that crystal, or a cluster of crystals. So if we think about a stone like jasper, which whether it's microcrystalline or cryptocrystalline, that's not important. It's an opaque stone. It does not allow light to pass. Picture jasper that can look like some sort of painting on the wall from, a 1970s house. It's opaque. It doesn't allow light to pass. All of the different names are pretty irrelevant. The chemical composition and the crystal structure is still the same. It's jasper, it's jasper, it's jasper. Or chert, which is just fun to say. But I digress. These beads that you see in many of my videos are actually onyx. Onyx is just a type of banded chalcedony or chalcedony, depending on who you're talking to and whether or not they're feeling pretentious. Chalcedony is just cryptocrystalline quartz. If it's banded, then we call it agate. Whether it allows light to pass or not is not necessarily a distinguishing feature for agate. But onyx does need to be banded. One thing I do need to point out is that even from Roman times, there was a treatment for quartz because there are those tiny little gaps between the crystals. The stone can be dyed or otherwise treated. The Roman way of making onyx, which is typically banded, completely uniformly black, was to boil it in sugar and then boil it in acid. The acid burns the sugar, making it completely black. That's what you find in a lot of cheap jewelry that's marketed towards men and goths. But it's just treated quartz, most of the time. Natural onyx should have this banding. While we're still talking about cryptocrystalline quartz and chalcedony, one thing that I want to point out is that if you're looking to identify chalcedony, one of the things that is helpful is to hold it up with a strong light behind it, or you can hold it up to the sun and rotate it around. What we're looking for is this bubble-like structure. And this is all because of the deposit that chalcedony grows in. So even once you've cut a uniform cabochon, sometimes that growth structure is still visible. So in these pieces of agate, they look like a uniform yellow or orange, and there are many different colors of chalcedony, but once you backlight it, you can see those boundaries between the bubble-like structure. And that is one indicator that this might be quartz. We still have other tests that we need to do. But our standard tests, like using the polariscope, will not work on microcrystalline and cryptocrystalline stones, because there's too many crystals. It distorts the reaction inside of the polariscope. So now that we understand about those three major groups, we can look at an example of the geode. As the geode forms, different areas of the geode cool off faster and slower, and that influences the growth of the crystal. So if we start on the outside, we notice that we can't really see any crystals. We just see these areas that seem pretty smooth and probably quite glassy. This is cryptocrystalline material. As we go towards the center of the geode, we see more well-developed, larger crystals. This is crystalline quartz. Chemically, they're both the same, but because the conditions allowed one to cool slower in the presence of rich nutrients, we get larger crystals, sometimes with nice colors. On the outside, it had to cool very quickly, creating very, very small crystals. And the transition zone in between those two areas is what we might find microcrystalline material in. No guarantees. All comes down to the conditions of that particular deposit. So by way of review, if you want to understand quartz, all you need to do is start out with how does it crystallize, then what color is it, and does it pass light or not. Once you have those features, all you really need to do is memorize a name for that kind of picture. What's jasper? Either microcrystalline or cryptocrystalline quartz, whichever color, whichever pattern, and it is opaque. It does not pass light. Cryptocrystalline quartz passes light and is orange. We call that carnelian. Now, what if it's crystalline and purple? That's amethyst. What about green amethyst? It doesn't exist. Okay, fine. There is a crystalline green quartz, but it's not amethyst. Amethyst is only purple. If it's green, it's called prasiolite. Why do we need all these names? Beats me. But if you like names, then quartz is great for you. But the important thing is not to get bogged down in the weeds. Understand what they are, then stick a name tag on it. Anyhow, if you've got any other questions, please reach out to me at gemshepherd.com, where you can contact me directly. Otherwise, leave me a comment down below, hit like, hit subscribe if you haven't already, tell all of your friends about me, and until next time, bye-bye.